Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with Cris from Latitude by Genesys to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the industry and some of the things that you can be doing to prepare for it. But before we get started, I know a lot of you probably already know Cris as a frequenter of the conference circuit around the receivables management and creditor spaces. But for those of you who have not been as lucky as me to get to know Cris personally over the past couple of years, Cris, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. I think every time I go to these conferences and ask that same question to people, everybody has sort of a roundabout way how they got into the collections industry. Same with me. I was hired 20 years ago. I'm coming up on my 20th year at the company. I was hired by a company called Soundbite Communications, which a lot of people will remember. And I had no experience in contact center or dialing. I just was lucky enough to get the job. And then when we started at Soundbite, it was a startup company. We had this technology. We weren't quite sure how to make any money on it. The original business plan wasn't really panning out. And somebody said, who needs to make a lot of phone calls? And that was collections industry. And we started exposing outbound dialer and outbound voice messaging to the collections industry. And it just took off like hotcakes. This was 2003. And I think our annual revenue that year was I think we were doing like 2 million a year. And then it went to 8 the following year, went to 16 the year after that. And then it went to 40 and we went public in 2007. Okay. And it was just, the salad days for outbound dialing. You certainly can't do it like we did back then. And then in 2013, Genesys acquired Soundbite Communications, and during that time, while we were doing all the collections work, I just took on a new role at Genesys, and I spent 5 years in program management and business operations and consulting, and just stayed out of the collections space. And then Genesys made another acquisition of Interactive Intelligence, and Interactive Intelligence had acquired a small software company a few years earlier called Latitude. And I was like, Latitude? I know Latitude because they were partners of Soundbite at the same time. Genesys didn't have a lot of people besides old Soundbiters that knew much about collections. And then my boss said, hey, do you want to get involved with Latitude? We need somebody with some level of experience in collections. And I was probably the most experienced, which shows you how few people at the time had a lot of experience. And so I jumped in, and that was in 2018, and haven't looked back since. Enjoying it. It was fun to get back into the conferences and meeting a lot of old people, old friends. There were some old people there too, but old friends who I met back in the aughts, and it's been great to get back there and get back to the shows, and I've always enjoyed the people in the business. Everybody's cool and laid back, and it's fun. It's made a lot of new friends since I've been back.
Well, it sounds like you've had an exciting ride into the industry, and I agree. There's no two stories that are the same as to how people found their way into debt collection. It always seems to be a little bit of a roundabout way. Now, I know a lot of our listeners are either using Latitude or very familiar with it, and may or may not be using Genesys tools as well. But could you tell everybody a little bit about Latitude by Genesys and Genesys?
If you haven't heard of us, I was like, what am I doing wrong over here? It's my job to make sure you know about Latitude by Genesys. It is for lack of a better term, a collection CRM. It's the nerve center of a good collection agency or a creditor's collections department. It's really that simple. You need a nerve center, a system that manages all the data that you have to deal with, and is the central point that not only your managers work on, but your agents work on as well. As that nerve center, we are connected to all different types of other providers, ancillary providers, other software companies, and data providers. So it's a great tool to have to be able to manage your entire collections operation, whether you're a creditor or a third party agency or a debt buyer or a servicer. So, I like to say, really, we're a collection agency in a box. Just add agents. You can just buy it from us. You're really ready to go from day one, as long as you got some people sitting in front of screens to talk to
And
the
so it
debt.
sounds like Latitude by Genesys ties right into what you guys do at Genesys. Can you give us kind of like the 10,000 foot overview of what you guys do there?
Yeah, Genesys is, we're a very small part of a very large software company. Genesys is a $2 billion plus software company and started about 30 years ago in the contact center space. And they originally started out as a company that they built software, sort of like what we would call middleware today. But we talked to this large piece of software that didn't talk to this large piece of software, and so Genesys engineers at the time, or a couple of guys, wrote some code that would get these two systems to talk to each other, and that's how the company was born. And what I like about Genesys is that's always been part of our DNA. We want to sell you the software that we have. Um, we're capitalists. We want to sell software and make money. But if you find something, a different piece of software that suits your needs better, we're happy to just sell you the stuff that connects and talks to everything. And so, Genesys Cloud CX is now the flagship product
Mm-hmm.
for Genesys, and we're seeing a lot of uptake over the last couple of years on the
Mm-hmm.
collection side of business. So it used to be I could only go out to our customer base or to our prospects and just sell them Latitude, because the old Genesys software was frankly, a little too pricey for this market. But now with Genesys Cloud, not only is it a good price point that fits the market, it is an incredible piece of software, highly functional, and can replace everything that most of our customers or prospects have for their contact center. So you've got the CRM, Latitude by Genesys, you got Genesys Cloud CX. You marry them together, then you really have got a collection agency in a box. You really don't need much of anything else. Maybe somebody in the HR department, but that's
Well,
about
I
it.
think this also brings up a really interesting discussion. And I know we're kind of here to talk a little bit about kind of the economic environment and those kinds of things. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about what you guys have done with Latitude by Genesys is the interconnectivity among systems, meaning so many platforms kind of close themselves off or only allow you to integrate with these individual groups. But you guys have been very open with the way
Mhm.
that you've provided APIs to a variety of different companies that offer not even necessarily competing services, although you do that as well, but like those to help you enhance what you're doing on your platform. So like Latitude by Genesys, and then bolting on something like a Success KPI, which is part of your partner network, enables people to leverage some of the artificial intelligence and some of these other tool sets while maintaining the integrity of the system of record, which is kind of that most important part of managing your collection accounts, right? Whether you're sending these to outsource, or you're
Yep.
going to communicate with these consumers directly, kind of having the flexibility of a platform that can be molded. And to me, I look at, an organization or software platform like yours, like the train tracks, right? These are the tracks that
Hmm.
are kind of running the business. And as we look at the current economic environment and we look at how there's this world of balance that we have to find. We tend to see for a number of years, called the 2008 timeframe, you saw a lot of accounts with low collectability. And then we went into a different
Yep.
period where we had far less accounts that were far more liquid, right? Like a lot more collectible. And now we're looking at this wave of potential charge offs that are coming down the pipeline. And I think collection agencies, creditors, and debt buyers are all looking at their business and going, if I have to add 1,000 more trains or 1,000 more cars to this
Right.
train, are my tracks going to hold? And it feels like that's kind of the
Yes,
world that you're living
exactly.
in right now.
It really is. It's interesting. Well, I'll just make this statement right off the bat. If you already have Latitude, you're already set up for success, because we can handle as many cars you want to send down that track as possible. That is not an issue for an enterprise grade collection CRM. That may not be the case with your existing CRM. If you are worried about that, I think that's a good worry to have, and you should be considering those types of things. That's putting my sales hat on a bit. But you're right about the collectability. I think, to me, that is the thing that keeps me up a little bit at night. Not maybe, and some other people, my customers included, maybe even more up at night. That was a bad time. We had lots of inventory, uncollectability. It was not good for the collections agency. Or the collections industry. It's funny. I tell, you're at your kids' sporting events and you're talking to the other dads, and, well, what do you do for a living? Oh, I do this. And what do you do for a living? And everybody in the whole country is attuned to the economy and is hearing the story or reading the stories. Even right now, it used to be just in our trades, but now it's coming out in regular mainstream media. The amount of debt that's out there, the Gen Z debt, their lack of ability to pay back on it, and what they look at me. Oh, your industry must be amazing when those times come on. And I try to explain to them that that's not necessarily the case. Yes, inventories can be high, but if nobody's it's not collectible. That doesn't do anybody any good, because costs go up and collectability goes down. And so it doesn't seem, you have to think of it the way we think of it here in the industry, but explaining it to people outside the industry is a little different. So getting back to 2008, 2009, we were, an outbound dialer, soundbite. People were loading up hundreds of thousands of records, making hundreds of thousands of calls, and really the liquidation rates were just tanking. And so I worry about that sort of situation again. It seems different. I don't know if it is different, but it just but maybe that's a gut feeling.
I don't think you're wrong, Chris. I don't think you're wrong, and I think from what I'm seeing is the efficiencies that can come from some of the technology that we've rolled out. Right. So you're seeing organizations that are implementing artificial intelligence. They're improving their scoring systems. They're finding new and interesting ways to communicate digitally. Right. Reg F kind of opened the door for some new things, or really left the door open, so to speak, for new communication channels. But if we don't find efficiencies in our work, like the margins of the collection agency have been shrinking over time. And if you're going to shrink those margins, where else can you go to create new revenue, right? You have to find efficiencies in your operations.
2022 is a tough year for our customers. 2020, great year. 2021, decent year. 2022, bad year for a lot of our customers. Obviously, student loans is, that one went in the toilet. And we don't know if or when it'll come back.
It won't be before an election cycle. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, probably. But the rest of it, I think people are well poised. I think I think what's good right now is it seems like everybody it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but even though it was, quite a while ago, 12 plus.
It's been some time, but it does feel like yesterday for those of us that were in collection. Honestly, look, I came into the space in 2006 and 2008 into 2009. We had a major crisis. 2011 comes the birth, or 10-11 comes the birth of the CFPB, and everything starts to change. It does feel like it was yesterday. I'm hoping that everybody's carrying forward that historical context, right? And I think that the math changed in 2020 as well. So we all were using, let's say, 20 years of data to make decisions and do predictions. The whole world changes in 2020, 2021, 2022. We're starting to come back into certainty at the end of 2022 and into the beginning of 2023. But now how far back can you go to use your data to create those efficiencies? So now that the world has kind of gone through this shake and cycle, we have to use these shorter periods to use in our prediction models as to the collectability of accounts, as to what we should
Yes.
be doing in terms of forecasting on financials, for debt buyers or agencies into the future. It's an interesting time to where it's the first time in my career where the data set has shrunk exponentially.
Yeah. What you just said that tapped into my mind is really back then it was collecting was like a blunt force
Yes.
object. You just had to
Yep.
pound it right, and if you pounded it right and did a little bit of optimization, you were going to be
Mhm.
you're going to be fine, right? Um, but since then, now with the CFPB and Reg F and everything else, you've got to be far more nuanced. You have to take advantage of
Mhm.
technology. You have got to really operate smarter than the other agencies that are you're
Mhm.
competing against. You've really got to apply technology in the right way and be creative about how to do it and flexible about how to do it, um, and be adaptable to what we're
Mhm.
seeing in the market, and really be looking at those reports, whether you're if you're looking at our canned reports or using an outside service. You just really need to be constantly tuning it, and it requires discipline to continue to think of new and unique ways of approaching it, and be willing to experiment. And that what I like about Latitude is we provide that
Mhm.
ability to you, with the integrated. We have more than 45 integrated vendors, and we're adding more every year. So if there's somebody out there who's really kind of come up with a great solution, getting back to our DNA, we want to connect with them and allow our customers to use that type of thing. But you don't want to be locked into a system with a tiny subset of good providers. There might be some
Mhm.
decent providers in there, but there's somebody else out there might be cooking up the a new thing that we want to integrate. And if you're locked into something else, that's not going to be good for
Well,
you.
living in a finite world is never helpful for a technology organization, but I think it's interesting as we look at the different levers that we can pull in our businesses to affect change. And so I think, changing to workflows and data waterfalls and other things are going to be essential to finding those efficiencies and maintaining those profitable margins that a collection agency ultimately needs as such a resource heavy type organization. And even on the back end of creditor operations, I feel like for a long time, debt collection or debt sales was a major strategy that was being used. I feel like it pulled back with the birth of the CFPB, and we're starting to see new products that are coming into the marketplace, as well as the creation of new consumer financial products like the fintech type products, right? And so when we're looking
Mm-hmm.
at consumers who were willing to originate a loan online, digital communications tends to be a more effective strategy with those people. But being able to pull those levers to work with different consumers through different communication methods, and trying to understand the mentality and perspective of those consumers based on their experience with that originating creditor, et cetera, I think is really going to be a driving factor for how we look at our industry over the coming, let's call it 3 to 5 years. Because as far as we can tell on all the data that I've seen coming from TransUnion and others, is it looks like there's this wave of consumer delinquencies that will crash. Now, April did not tell that story, but cyclically, as a
No.
as a industry that lives in a perpetual annual cycle, right? April and May tend to be the best months of the year. That's tax return time, right? Like
Yeah.
that's when people
Actually,
get
yeah.
this injection of personal capital and consumers start to pay down debts. Like that's a fairly common, cycle. So I don't know if the dips that we're seeing in delinquencies in the month of April are going to be a direct result of that. That's what my gut says, because that's what my gut's told me for the last 20 years, watching the same cycle happen over and over again, regardless of the
Yep.
economic environment. So I'm curious to see how some more of this unfolds. I think the predictions are fairly strong that we do see a lot more accounts that come into the industry, but every time that that volume goes up so exponentially, so does the decrease in terms of the collectability of accounts. And so in those times, we look for those technology efficiencies that we can apply, whether it be communication channels, data, waterfalls, workflows, etc. And it sounds like you guys have kind of positioned your clients to be able to pull those levers when they need to.
We do. I think the one thing that we and maybe this will start a discussion down below on YouTube, but the where I'm unclear, and I think we're a software company, and we're not as tuned to this on a daily basis as the folks who are actually running agencies. But the thing that other thing I'm sort of worried about is when are the creditors going to start releasing more of their inventory? I think they've been holding it back for way too long. I mean, I get it. I understand why they held back, but I don't. If this tsunami is really there, we know the tsunami is there. It's just whether it is sort of being artificially held back right now. So are they going to trickle feed it down, or is it just going to get released into the market? And I don't know. I don't know what's best, but I want whatever's best.
Look, I don't know about what's best, right, is a subjective statement, but here's what I can say. And I know a lot of people have heard me talk about what I like to call the Clark Griswold theory. And for those of us that have seen, right, like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, this is where I get it from. It's the bonus at the end of the year. And I think when financial institutions are you either have individual executives that are looking at how their bonuses are structured and whether or not that debt sales lever is something that they want to pull to put them into a financial position, whether it be for a bonus or the financial performance and results that they're going to demonstrate for that ending of the year. I always saw this influx when I was a debt broker. There was always this big influx of debt sales from the creditors and from debt buyers that would start happening end of November into December, and like right before New Year's was always a rush to close deals for people, right? And there was always a lot of transactions that were happening in that time span. And maybe it's because I was watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation while I was processing the post-sale support and, those actual, debt sale transactions. But I always kind of looked at it from that perspective. And so I think as we start moving into the end of the year, although 2023 could be unique being the beginning of the 2024 election cycle. So that's why I don't think we're going to see a ton of student loans coming back into the marketplace until probably early 2025. I believe it's like September is when they're supposed to be reactivated. I expect the can to get kicked yet one more time because nobody wants to go into it's time to pay your bills right before it's an election.
All right. I'm gonna let's do a friendly bet. $20. I'll say $20 that it will be released in September.
Hey, look, I'm all for debt obligations becoming reinstated and allowing the federal government to take that influx of capital to pay down those loans and not be stuck in a guaranteed position.
And I don't have any data.
That's all right. Let's look, and that's fine. I'm going with my gut instinct as well. So I'm curious to see how that unfolds. But now we're going to have to do a follow up at DCS.
We'll do it. DCS,
I'm feeling like we got a follow up coming at DCS, which is going to be at the end of September at the Red Rock in Las Vegas.
Right.
Very much looking forward to that show, especially coming out the tail end of such a successful CRS at the end of May. So, Cris, I want to I always enjoy our opportunities to chat. I really want to thank you for coming on and having such an interesting discussion with me today. Your insights and perspective is always appreciated.
That's very kind of you, and thank you for having me.
For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask or you want to get into the mix on this discussion, you can leave those comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and Cris and I will be happy to respond to those. If you have additional topics that you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully I can talk Cris into coming back onto this podcast yet one more time to continue helping me create great content for a great industry. But until next time, Cris, thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And for all of you watching, thank you as well. We'll talk to you again soon.